Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
On a cold, rainy fall morning in southwest Michigan, a utility worker noticed something alarming. It looked like a car had crashed off the road into an embankment. The vehicle was still running. There was no sign of the driver in the red Dodge Neon, where the gear shift was stuck in drive and the front tire was spinning. The windshield wipers were going and music was playing. The car looked beat up, with a partially smashed windshield and a broken windshield wiper. It looked like someone had thrown a rock at it. According to the sheriff's investigative report, the vehicle's front end was hanging over the embankment, and it appeared as if the vehicle was hung up on the frame. The utility worker called 911. It was October 16, 2001. Just before 10 a.m., law enforcement arrived to inspect the scene on the dead-end dirt road near the local community college in Texas Township, outside Kalamazoo, Michigan. I just thought that I had an abandoned vehicle. Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Deputy John Hoffman would later testify about pulling up in his cruiser. That possibly someone in the middle of the night during the rain tried to turn around back there and got stuck, and then got locked out of their car. Deputy Hoffman called a tow truck. The car was 50 feet off the road by a cul-de-sac, surrounded by woods and walking trails. Although this wasn't in the middle of nowhere, Kalamazoo Valley Community College, a school of about 6,000 students, was a half-mile away, and several large commercial buildings and apartments were nearby too. The overnight rainfall covered the windows, making it hard to see inside the car. The heat was turned on too on this 40-degree morning, so the windows were steamed. The car doors were locked. A water droplet streaked down the passenger window, giving the deputy a better view inside. The car was messy, but was that skin a person? Someone not moving under that white coat and all those coat hangers? By now, more officers had arrived at the scene. Deputy Hoffman and another deputy successfully slim-jimmed the car to break inside. There, under the jacket, was the body of a dead, naked woman. It was Maria Willson. Maria, who was 34 years old, had been strangled to death. Her head slumped on the front passenger seat, and her legs and feet were on the floorboard of the passenger side. Rigor mortis had already set in. All of her clothes, her blue jeans, her jacket, red sports bra, and her shoes had been taken off and were gone. Her black wallet and her key ring had also been taken. I checked the area business dumpsters, trash receptacles, to see if there was any type of evidence that would be associated with that, Deputy Hoffman testified. Did you find anything at all? A prosecuting attorney asked. No, Deputy Hoffman replied. Maria's clothes and missing possessions would all never be found. The sheriff's department began looking for clues. When the prosecution presented evidence in court years later, they never mentioned any physical evidence collected inside the car that pointed to Maria's killer. A defense attorney would say there wasn't any, calling this a circumstantial case. Things like tire tracks and footprints were hard to come by. The broken windshield wiper was 20 feet from Maria's car. I looked at the seat position, Deputy Hoffman testified. The passenger seat appeared to be very close to the dashboard, as opposed to the driver's seat that seemed to be back a little further from the steering wheel. In the back seat was a styrofoam to-go container with leftover fried tortillas, chicken, and vegetables. It was an important clue into the last night of Maria's life. On the night of her murder, Maria's car was seen on surveillance footage, driving down the dead-end Elm Valley Drive at about 3:50 a.m., according to a search warrant. 20 minutes later, a figure can then be seen walking alone down Elm Valley Drive, quote, in an appearance of a hurried pace. The sheriff's report gives a little insight into who Maria was. She wasn't fancy. She normally wore a t-shirt and jeans. She worked out regularly. She liked to be outdoors and kayaked. She was active and liked to go on walks. For 8 years, she worked at a plastics factory that manufactured connectors for electrical circuitry in motor vehicles. She was punctual and dependable at work. She was a mother. Maria was also going through a hard time. Many people around her expressed concerns about her erratic behavior. She had a temper, some said, that caused problems with her neighbors and her family. Some of the relationships in her life were strained. She didn't have custody of her daughter. Her employer worried about her. Maria switched to overnight shifts in the last 2 weeks, and during that time, employees had noticed a personality shift with her, according to the sheriff's report. Another colleague said Maria, in the past 3 months, had a significant weight loss, which Maria had told them was 35 pounds. But who would want to kill Maria Willson? Could it have been a random attack? Some of Maria's friends said Maria could be outgoing and that she often chatted up strangers. Other people in her life raised red flags, and sheriff's investigators wanted to question them. Could it be Maria's new boyfriend or the father of Maria's child? Maria had also confided to a friend that she was being harassed by a male coworker. She said that her coworker had showed up at her apartment in the past and had been harassing her at work, and that she had changed schedules to get away from him, the sheriff's report said. These were all leads for detectives to explore. One lead really stood out to them. But would it lead to her killer? This is Jillian in partnership with Law and Crime. You are listening to Court Junkie, episode 291, part 1. On the last night of her life, Maria Willson went to the gym to work out. It was October 15th, 2001. As she normally did, she exercised for about 2 hours and then left at about 9:15 p.m. The to-go container that had been found in Maria's back seat came from Mi Ranchito, a nearby restaurant. Officers from the sheriff's department visited Mi Ranchito, where Maria ate after her workout. A bartender remembered seeing her come in and sit on a bar stool. Someone else was already seated at the bar when she arrived. Timothy Forshee. Tim was the 39-year-old manager at the nearby Culver's fast food restaurant. Maria ordered a chicken fajita salad just before the kitchen closed at 10 p.m. Maria was apparently a memorable customer. According to testimony, at one point she left the bar and sat with 2 older men who appeared to be strangers to her. At one point, she lifted up her shirt to show off her abs. Then she returned to the bar and sat back next to Tim. The 2 older men who chatted with Maria left 30 minutes before she did. The receipt records indicate that Maria paid for her food at 10:22 p.m., although the bartender said she didn't leave right away. Tim paid at 11:04 p.m. He left after she did. A nearby gas station surveillance video captured Maria there from 10:55 p.m. to 11 p.m. According to court records, the video showed Maria looking out the front window as if in anticipation of seeing someone. That would be right around the time Tim left Mi Ranchito. Heading home from there, the route would take him right past the gas station where Maria was. Maria was supposed to work that night at her factory job. Her shift started at midnight, but she never made it. Again, Maria had always been a dependable and conscientious worker. She wasn't the kind of employee to skip work. The next morning, Maria was found dead in her car. Detective Sergeant Bruce Wiersma went to Culver's, a fast food restaurant that sold burgers and fries and custard. From the restaurant, he got Tim's address and then went to interview him. Tim lived 1 mile away from where Maria's running car was found and had been one of the last people to see her alive. Detective Sergeant Wiersma wrote in his report, quote, "At that time, I attempted to question Forshee as to what he knew about the victim and what was discussed while at the bar. At this point, Forshee became visibly shaken, was extremely nervous, and was sweating, would not look me in the eye. When asked what was discussed between he and she while at the bar, he said he didn't really remember, that she was just talking to him. Further, she left the bar, and that's all he knew." When asked if he saw Maria again after leaving Mi Ranchito, Tim said no, and that he went straight home. He said he couldn't recall what time he left the restaurant. Detective Sergeant Wiersma asked if Tim had a criminal record or had ever been arrested before. Tim said he had only been arrested for a DUI. But that would later prove to be a lie. Tim was a registered sex offender, and he had recently been arrested for failing to update his address. Detective Sergeant Wiersma left his business card and urged him to call him if he had anything more to report. The sheriff's office also tracked down Maria's boyfriend, Doug. Maria and Doug had been dating for less than a year. Doug said the last time he had seen Maria was a few days earlier on October 14th. They went walking on the trails by the library and then went to the mall for lunch. That evening, she called him and said she would come over later in the week, but she never showed up. Doug wasn't too worried. Sometimes Maria didn't follow through with what she said, he told officers. As for a potential alibi, Doug said that on October 15th, he worked his shift at a bath and shower fixture manufacturer from 1:30 p.m. to about 10 p.m. He said he then came home, drank a couple of beers, watched an NFL game, and went to bed. He was home on October 16th until he went to work again at 1:30. Meanwhile, investigators learned more about Maria. She had a condo, but she didn't like staying there alone and had issues with her neighbors, so she often stayed the night with a platonic male friend, who also happened to be named Doug. This Doug also didn't seem worried when Maria went missing on that Tuesday night. Maybe she was just at the other Doug's place, or maybe she was at her own place. Her friend Doug said Maria liked to walk around the city to do errands and go to parks. Sometimes she traded phone numbers with men she met. She occasionally got rides home with strangers. According to the sheriff's report, her friend Doug said he was not surprised that Maria had come into foul play, as she had been warned many times about being out at night alone, and that he predicted something would happen to her with these goofballs that she meets. A detective also interviewed Donald Campbell, who was Maria's ex-boyfriend and the father of her daughter. Again, from the sheriff's report, it was noted that at the time we spoke with him, Donald Campbell was highly intoxicated, that he admitted that he had been drinking because of the stresses that have occurred in his life as of earlier that morning, when he found out that Maria Willson was deceased. Donald allowed police to search his truck. They didn't find anything. He then agreed to take a polygraph. After his interview, the detectives promptly alerted Donald's parole officer that Donald was drunk. Donald's sister told authorities her brother hadn't spoken to Maria in years. Maria's mother said Donald had broken into Maria's home 6 or 7 years prior and assaulted her when they were arguing. The sheriff's report also indicated that Maria's relationship with some family members may have been fractured. It was said she had a short fuse and was acting bizarrely, which worried her loved ones. The last time Maria's mom had seen her was about 4 months earlier, when Maria tried to assault her, according to the report. Checking on all the different leads and the men in Maria's life, authorities latched onto one person they had already interviewed as their main suspect. It was Tim Forshee, the fast food manager. Did Maria Willson and Tim Forshee know each other before sitting next to each other at the bar at Mi Ranchito? Apparently so, although the full details are reportedly still not known. Renee Bricker, who knew Tim, gave some insight to the sheriff's department. According to the sheriff's report, Renee and Tim were friends. She thought he was a nice guy. Renee, who was married, even tried to set him up on dates. On October 6th, 10 days before the murder, Renee and her friends ate dinner at Culver's when they noticed a crestfallen blonde. Renee recognized the woman later as Maria Willson. The following is from the sheriff's report. Mrs. Bricker indicated that she felt when Maria came in and sat down that she looked sad and looked like she had been crying. She said that normally she would have gone over and spoken with Maria to see if there was anything she could do. However, that because she was with friends, she did not do this. She approached the manager of the restaurant, Tim Forshee, as she was leaving and pointed out Maria Willson and asked him to go over and speak with her, indicating to Tim that she felt that Maria looked troubled. Forshee then made some comment about not wanting to get involved with any more troubled women, and Mrs. Bricker again asked him to go over and speak with her to see if he could be of assistance. As she left, he indicated that he would go over and talk with her. By some accounts, Tim Forshee was charming and outgoing. Bob Flintrop, who owned the Culvers where Tim worked, told the Kalamazoo Gazette, "I think he was well liked by customers and employees. I think that's what's so shocking." If anyone had asked the employees who worked for Tim, at least one teenage girl would have said he made her uncomfortable and was creepy. But at the time, no one asked her. Some of his coworkers, at least the male ones, had no problems with him. Manager Bill O'Brien told the Kalamazoo Gazette, "It's hard to get a good feel, but he's always been a good employee as far as I'm concerned. I got along with him. He was a good guy with me." Some said Tim came across as flirty and personable. "A ladies' man," one person told the Gazette. Someone else also questioned his sexuality and thought he might be gay. In the newspaper, Tim's landlord described him as the perfect tenant: quiet, clean, helpful, offering to do odd jobs around the 7-acre horse farm. "To me, he was a very gentle, quiet-to-himself person," the landlord said. But perhaps what she didn't know was that Tim had a criminal past. As a 17-year-old, he was caught red-handed breaking into a home. He was arrested in the dining room. He broke in through a garage window and was caught in the act of stealing $10 in cash and an 1890 silver dollar. That was in 1980. In 1994, he was convicted of rape and served 4 months in jail. I'll explain more about that case later. By 2001, however, Tim was a highly regarded fast food manager. The restaurant owners, Bob and Linda Flintrop, told law enforcement that there had been some red flags. Twice before, small amounts of money had turned up missing. On New Year's Eve 2000, $320 was taken from the safe. Then the register was $184 short in September 2001, a few weeks before Maria's death. 4 managers counted the money and it was all there. The 5th manager to count it was Tim. On October 16th, the morning Maria's body was found just after 10 a.m., Tim acted strangely at work. He was scheduled to start at 8 a.m., but he showed up 2 hours late. Tim said he had overslept from taking cold medicine. The owners noticed he looked different. He had a new hairstyle and was acting kind of funny and mixing up his activities or duties within the restaurant. He was normally an excellent manager, but that week he put the wrong ingredients in the batter and ruined it. The dining room was suddenly filthy and customers complained. Tim didn't seem to be paying attention to his job. And so that's how Tim Forshee emerged as the main suspect in Maria Willson's murder. But within just a few days after her death, something would happen that would shake up the investigation. Just after 4 p.m. on October 22nd, Tim volunteered to take the restaurant's cash and deposit it in the bank. He left with a Keystone Community Bank bag containing more than $16,000, which was the restaurant's sales for 3.5 days. At 4:30 p.m., he drove to a car dealership, parked his own vehicle, and then test drove a blue 1998 Chevy Blazer. He then never returned. A few hours later, Tim contacted his sister with astonishing news. He said he was bleeding and laying in a field. He was lost and confused. He said he had been robbed at a gas station and kidnapped while on the way to deposit the restaurant's cash at the bank. He didn't know where he was. Tim never called 911, just his sister. According to court records, Timothy Forshee did not ask her to contact their father, as he thought that the father would be mad at him, and he also expressed concern that his boss would be mad at him for allowing the money to be stolen from him. Law enforcement took this allegation seriously. They searched with 2 helicopters to find him. The Portage Police Department, along with the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office, worked together to look for him. The Sheriff's Department also attempted to get cell phone records for Tim to pinpoint where he was when he reached out for help. Investigators helped Tim's sister add more minutes on his prepaid cell phone in case he called again. But Tim had vanished. While investigating Tim Forshee's disappearance, investigators first interviewed the Culver's owners on October 23rd. They then went to check the older farmhouse Tim rented in Texas Township. He wasn't there. Tim's landlord hadn't seen him around either. Tim's landlord, Shirley Neal, lived in a house 50 feet from where Tim was staying, so she kept a close eye on him. She told police that his SUV was parked in the driveway as usual on October 21st. When she walked by it, she had noticed lots of clothing in hangers and what looked like a suitcase in the back. With her permission, investigators searched Tim's home. It seemed like he was packing up to leave town. While a sheriff's deputy was there, Tim's girlfriend, Kelly Lear, arrived, looking for Tim too. Tim and Kelly, who had known each other for years, had been together romantically for 6 months. They were exclusive, Kelly told investigators. Their new relationship seemed to be moving fast. She said they had talked about marriage and were planning a future together. That day, investigators obtained a court-approved search warrant for Tim's farmhouse, which seemed clean and orderly. They collected items like a hairbrush, a toothbrush, a bathroom garbage can, ashtrays, pillows from Tim's bed, his answering machine cassette tape, and bedding in the washer. The Sheriff's Department also received a copy of a report from the Kentwood Police Department about a crime Tim had committed back in 1994. Tim had been convicted of third-degree attempted criminal sexual conduct in Kent County, less than an hour north of Kalamazoo. He had served 4 months in prison and then 30 months of probation. At the time of that crime, Tim had been staying at a hotel with a coworker on a work trip. The two had been drinking when Tim strangled her and raped her while she was unconscious in his hotel room. According to the report, when the victim woke up while the sexual assault was unfolding, Tim said, "Shh," and then cut off her windpipe and she passed out. She then woke up sometime later in the bed with him, and Tim was snoring. After the woman woke up, she gathered up all of her clothes, which is when Tim woke up and asked where she was going. She said she was going to the bathroom and then left. He called her twice afterward. "I hope you don't hate me," Tim said, according to the court records. He wished he could turn back time to get to know her better because he messed up, he told her. He then kept calling her, and that's when she called the police. She had kept her underwear as evidence. Tim was 31 years old at the time. Armed with this information from that 1994 rape, the Sheriff's Department asked Tim's girlfriend, Kelly, if he had been abusive to her too. Kelly denied Tim had ever choked her, but they noticed she also wore a turtleneck for the second straight day in a row. According to the report, when this was pointed out to her, she immediately pulled down the turtleneck to display her neck area. It was noted there was bruising or other marks on her neck. Kelly shed more information about Tim's life. He was going through financial problems and he seemed despondent. "Just put a pillow over my head and put me out of my misery," she said he had told her recently. On October 20th, Tim and Kelly spent the afternoon together and had sex. This would have been a few days after Maria's death. Kelly told the sheriff's department Tim was acting differently. He was actually nice. Quote, "Kelly indicates that this is the most gentle and caring Forshy has ever been to her." Kelly further indicates that she was feeling good about this because she thought Forshy might be letting his guard down because he is a very guarded individual about emotions. But now with detectives interviewing her, and with Tim missing and named as a murder suspect, Kelly admitted she was suspicious of him. Tim had gone radio silent. Kelly was trying to get a hold of him to convince him to turn himself in. She promised to contact the sheriff's department if he contacted her. Kelly told them Tim kept a small handgun in a dining room hutch drawer. When investigators searched the hutch drawer, it was empty. Criminal charges were filed. An arrest warrant on embezzlement and larceny charges went out for the missing $16,000 and the stolen SUV. The Kalamazoo County's prosecuting attorney sent a letter to the FBI on November 1st, 2001. It read, "Due to the seriousness of these charges, our office will extradite Mr. Forshy should he be found outside of the state of Michigan. Our office is requesting the Federal Bureau of Investigation's assistance in the apprehension of Timothy Edward Forshy so that he may be apprehended and returned to the state of Michigan and the county of Kalamazoo to face the charges against him." The sheriff's office was already aware that Tim Forshy choked a woman to the point of unconsciousness and had raped her in 1994. They would soon learn about more attacks spanning across years. There was no doubt Tim Forshy was a serial predator of women. A long list of women contacted the sheriff's department in October 2001 and shared their horror stories. The sheriff's report said, following the news coverage that the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department was actively seeking Tim Forshy as possibly a suspect in the homicide of Maria Willson, which was aired on both television and the local print media, along with the information that the manner of death of Maria Willson was strangulation, this officer received several calls from women having had a former romantic or non-romantic involvement with Mr. Forshy. The following details some of the relationships, and most important to note is there is a clear pattern of Timothy Forshy using force to choke or strangle women in a romantic involvement. I want to read that line from the sheriff's report one more time because it's quite important to the rest of this story. There is a clear pattern of Timothy Forshy using force to choke or strangle women in a romantic involvement. One woman who met Tim in 1987, when he was a customer and she was a waitress, said he showed up unexpectedly at her house one night. Her kids were asleep. She wasn't dressed to have company. They stood outside the door for 15 minutes chatting. Tim wanted to come in, so she changed her clothes and let him in the living room. According to the sheriff's report, Forshy suddenly grabbed her by the neck with both hands and began choking her. She pushed him away and started screaming, loud enough for the neighbors to hear and turn on their lights. Tim fled. The woman was hurt. She had bruises on her neck and her blood vessels ruptured in her eyes. She didn't call the police, though. She told her family, who then gave Tim a warning, "Don't return." The choking attack was not as a result of any sort of sexual approach. There was no sexual activity prior to the choking incident, and he never made any sexual advances toward her. He simply began choking her without warning, the sheriff's report said. Detective Rick Green spoke to another woman on the phone who dated Tim for about 3 months around 1989 or 1990 and gave accounts of violent sex. He immediately tried to push his arm against her neck, choking her when they were intimate, the sheriff's report said. She stated on both occasions he had put his arm against her throat in a manner in which she was choking, and that it frightened her and scared her, and that she stopped him, asking him, "What are you doing?" And he replied, "Nothing," and stopped. She states that based upon this, she was a little scared of him and ended the relationship. Complicating matters, the woman's sister ended up dating Tim too, off and on for 7 years, and even moved in with him. The woman warned her sister what Tim was like, but the sister ignored her. The sister also spoke with the sheriff's department on the phone after Maria's death. She said the first time they had sex, quote, Timothy Forshee tried to choke her with his forearm across her throat. She stated that she stopped him and let him know on no uncertain terms not to do that to her again. She indicates that following, he never tried to choke her again, but that it scared her at the time, based on what her sister had said, and that she never told her sister or her mother about that situation, so as not to scare them. The sister did state Forshee was the type of person never to be faithful to any one female, and that if anyone offered him any type of sexual contact, he would always take it. He seemed to crave physical contact when he was with someone and always had to be touching them, the sheriff's report said. She states upon confronting him with evidence of being with other women, he would always apologize, and she would stay in the relationship until she had finally had enough of him. The sister appeared to be dating Tim around the time he was charged with the 1994 rape. Tim told the sister he and the victim were both drunk, and he wasn't sure what happened, but he claimed they never had sex. Tim went to jail, and later the sister learned Tim had lied, that he had been charged with a sex crime. Tim and the sister broke up. Another woman who read about Tim in the Kalamazoo Gazette recalled in 1995 when Tim was the manager at a Chili's and she was a patron. She was older than him and felt Tim viewed her as kind of a mother figure. That didn't stop him from showing up unexpectedly at her home just before Christmas that year. They sat on her couch when Tim announced, "I have a Christmas present for you." And then he threw her forcefully down in front of the Christmas tree and got on top of her and started attempting to kiss her, according to the sheriff's report. She did not want that at all. It was unexpected and unwanted, and that she squirmed out from under him and said, "You've got to go." And he got off and they walked towards the door. The sheriff's report said, when reaching the door, he seemed to snap, and at that time he threw her backward on some stairs. She was face down in that Forshee was on top of her or to her side and had his hands around her throat. She believed the thumbs were in her windpipe and that he was forcefully choking her in a very violent and aggressive nature to the point where she could not breathe and felt she was going to pass out. She was frightened and terrified of him and told him, "My son is going to be right home." She was just able to gasp this out. She did recall the fingers or the thumbs, as she believed were right in the notch area of her throat. She felt she was about to lose consciousness. However, after telling him that her son was going to be right home, he seemed to snap back and get off of her, and then seemed to act like a little boy and stated, "Don't hate me, don't hate me. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," and then left. She never wanted to see him again. He called her sounding drunk a year later, but she hung up on him. She then went to Culver's in September 2001, unaware Tim was the manager there. She wasn't sure if he noticed her. She left without speaking to him. Tim was also reportedly targeting realtors at open houses. One realtor recognized him as the man who frightened her twice in the late 1990s. "Where's the basement?" Tim had asked her when she showed him a ranch house in nearby Portage in 1997. The realtor pointed out he hadn't listed a basement in his criteria. Tim pivoted and asked if she was married. She states that she then proceeded to go outside with him, moving towards her car, talking about the yard and everything else. She states something about him made her feel uncomfortable, the sheriff's report said. A year later, Tim contacted her again and asked if she would join him to see another house for sale. The realtor refused to go. Fast forward to 1999. the realtor threw an open house, complete with appetizers, for a $200,000 house in a subdivision. It was a success. Lots of people showed up, including Tim Forshee. He was back. He stood 2 feet from her and asked, "Remember me?" The realtor instantly recognized his face from 1997, although she had forgotten his name. The memory of him was hard to displace. Tim had arrived at the start of the open house and stayed until it was over. He claimed he was waiting for his parents to meet him there to see the house. The realtor was nervous. Her cell phone didn't have service. By now, the open house was empty. She started packing up her papers and the food and returning to her car to load up. When she went back in for another trip, Tim beckoned for her to come into the basement. She stated she didn't want to and knew something wasn't right with him. His eyes seemed like he was on drugs when he had come in. She went a couple of steps and peeked over at him, trying not to act nervous, the sheriff's report said. Tim asked her more questions, like if he could install a bathroom down there. And then the realtor heard the comforting sound of footsteps. "Thank God," she wrote in her statement to law enforcement. She was saved by another realtor who happened to live across the street and had grown concerned that there might be some sort of problem since her car had been parked in front for a long period of time. The other realtor helped her finally get Tim to leave. In hindsight, the realtor said she believed she might have been a victim too, had she not keyed in so soon on his odd behavior, the sheriff's report said. She felt she narrowly escaped being one of Tim's victims. A friend of a Kalamazoo County sheriff's deputy also wanted to share information with authorities about her on-again, off-again relationship with Tim from 1996 to 1999. Quote, "She was in a sexual relationship with him that over a period of what she believed was 2 to 3 years, they would have sex 2 or 3 times a week, and that each and every time they had sex, he would try to choke her. She states that she would tell him not to do this, and he would still continue to try each and every subsequent time. She states that when she would get upset with him, he would apologize profusely afterward, sometimes even crying about it, saying, 'I'm so sorry.' She states that he would choke her by placing his hands around her neck and pushing in forcefully on her neck, and she would have to push him away." Yet another woman went on a date with Tim in 1998 when he worked as a convenience store manager, and she was a regular, buying coffee there every morning. Tim asked her out and they went and had dinner and drinks. Afterwards, they went back to his place to watch a movie. Tim lit candles and put on music. He asked if he could kiss her, and it was an awkward kiss at best. Then it got violent. He then pushed her forcefully down onto the couch and grasped her neck with his hand, encompassing the front of her neck, pushing down against her. She stated at that time she pushed against his chest and told him to get up and off of her, the sheriff's report said. The woman told Tim she wasn't interested in this kind of behavior, and that made Tim upset. "Did I offend you?" he asked her. The woman said it was time for her to leave. It was snowing heavily at the time, and Forshee tried to convince her to stay. However, she made an excuse of needing to go home and check to see if her kids had called, the sheriff's report said. She did not date Forshee again. However, he did call her 4 to 5 times at her apartment, and she became concerned about this, but ended up moving to St. Joseph, Michigan in January of 1999. She had no further contact with Forshee. Another woman whose account is undated but was from before he started working at Culver's told police that she was kissing Tim back at his apartment. Quote, "Forshee began to choke her, tightening his hand around her neck. While he was choking her and kissing her, he suddenly jumped up and stated that he had messed up his pants, at which time she noticed a wet spot at the front of his trousers. He then went into the bathroom as he removed his trousers, indicating that he had ejaculated his pants while kissing her, stating, 'Oops, I made a mess.'" The sheriff's report went on to say, the redacted woman's name states that at no time did she have contact with his penis, nor were Forshee's hands anywhere but around her neck. She states that she thought this behavior was very bizarre, and that after the incident, she left the apartment. Another woman who contacted the nearby Parchment police dated Tim for about a month in the year 2000 and remembered when he kissed her, he put his hands on her neck in a choking manner. They had sex 3 times in the course of their relationship. Every time, Tim put his hands on her throat at the start, and the woman told him not to do that, although it hadn't reached the point where she couldn't breathe, the sheriff's report said. She ended the relationship as she felt he was a bit odd. Another woman who dated Tim for 6 weeks in the summer of 2001 recalled him putting his hands on her neck the first time they kissed on a date in a park. When she went over to his house, he had a dark sense of humor, telling her, "You know I could keep you here if I wanted to," when he showed her cabinets with big padlocks on a tour of his home. He had pre-made drinks in the fridge. She decided on a beer instead because she was weirded out. When he kissed her goodnight, he, quote, placed both hands around her neck and placed very forceful pressure against her windpipe with his hands. And she pushed him off, stating, "What are you doing?" And he stated, "You don't like that?" She stated at that time she got up and left. But the woman agreed to see Tim again, and they went out a few more times. On the next date, they did in fact have sex, and that the first thing he did was go for the throat and tried to choke her by placing his fingers around her throat and applying very forceful pressure, the sheriff's report said. Detective Sergeant William Sparrow interviewed another one of Tim's ex-girlfriends, who had dated him for 5 years before breaking up in March 2001, when she found out he had slept with other women. She said he was stalking her after the breakup. Tim choked her once during sex until she almost passed out. She said she told him never to do that again. She advised that approximately every 4th time they had sex that Forsey would try to choke her, but she would push his hands away. He would then rub her neck with his thumbs. She also stated that he made the statements several times, "I could choke you to death. I love you. I don't mean to hurt you." The sheriff's report also went on to say, she also advised that he would grab her arms, in particular around the bicep area, very hard to the point of bruising, and she advised that she does not bruise very easily, and that he would proceed to try to choke her. The same day, the sheriff's department interviewed Kelly Lear, Tim's girlfriend at the time of Maria's murder. They were alerted about another woman in Middlebury, Indiana, who said she was having sex with Tim around the same time after a mutual friend at Culver's introduced them. On the night of October 13th, 3 days before Maria's death, the Middlebury woman said she was at Tim's place when, quote, in the middle of intercourse, Forsey placed both of his hands around her neck and began to squeeze her throat, cutting off her air. She states that she tried to grab his hands and pull them away. Also tried to get him to stop by telling him he was choking her. However, he continued to constrict her airway, preventing her from breathing and causing her to black out. She states that the next thing she became aware of was that she was awoke at 10:30 a.m. She states that she knew she didn't pass out as a result of alcohol. She only had 2 vodka and tonics the night before, and that she confronted Tim about choking her, and he denied having done it. She states that she examined her neck area and noted no bruising or marks. She states that she knows she was choked and passed out, as when she awoke, she knew that Forsey had completed the sex act with her unconscious, as there were bodily fluids in the bed near where she had passed out. She said she has no recollection of Tim ejaculating. She further states that he had become rough on 2 previous occasions, however, nothing to this level. She states that after she awakened, she got dressed and left. The women brutalized by Tim shared his other character flaws with the sheriff's department. He was broke. He had trouble keeping jobs. He lived paycheck to paycheck. He was vain. His confidence was low. He was into drugs. He was a loner. He had a strict religious father. In case you lost count, how many women reported Tim choking them or making them feel scared for their safety? The number exceeded a dozen. But investigators didn't make any initial arrests or use those women's stories to try and build their case in Maria Willson's murder. Maria Willson was found dead in her car on October 16, 2001. Tim Forshee took Culver's money and the dealership's vehicle 5 days later, and then disappeared. Even though social media was in its infancy back in those days, Tim's name and picture was plastered all over the TV news and in the Kalamazoo Gazette. He was officially a murder suspect. About 2 weeks after he went on the run, a group of coworkers went on a weekend bus trip to Traverse City, about 3 hours away from Kalamazoo. One woman noticed Tim drinking at a hotel bar. The woman, who didn't piece together that Tim was a wanted man, instead recognized him as someone that her friend had dated 3 or 4 months earlier in Kalamazoo. The friend called her girlfriend to let her know she had spotted him in Traverse City. Fortunately, her friend was well aware that Tim was wanted, and soon Kalamazoo County and Traverse City authorities were notified of his whereabouts. Within hours, Tim was found by the police, who arrested him on November 3rd, 2001. And so Tim had been caught, but that's not the end of this story by any means. Before his arrest, Tim had been using the alias Sean Allen and other fake names as he stayed in hotels across the state. He paid with cash. Inside his room at the Days Inn Motel, Traverse City police found $8,213 of the Culvers' stolen cash. Tim had initially stolen $16,000. They also found the stolen vehicle from the dealership, hidden in a storage unit Tim had rented. Concealed in his leather jacket lining at the time of his arrest, Tim kept a black tie with white dots. The tie looked stretched out, which seemed to fit with the nature of Maria's death, according to the sheriff's report. Tim refused to answer questions until he spoke with the defense attorney first. Before he was extradited to Kalamazoo County, the Grand Traverse County sheriff's officials noticed he had scratches on his knuckles. They collected Tim's saliva, blood, hair, and pubic hair and sent the samples to the Michigan State Police Forensic Crime Lab. None of the results appeared to be conclusive evidence for Maria's murder, since the prosecution didn't bring them up later during 2 preliminary examination hearings. Instead of being charged with murder, Tim was charged with embezzlement and larceny. Back in Kalamazoo County, Tim's preliminary examination was November 14, 2001. The judge heard the evidence as he deliberated if there was enough evidence, probable cause, for the case to get bound for trial in circuit court. Tim did not take the stand. Robert Philtrop, the Culver's owner, testified that Tim had been trusted with money and making bank deposits for his job before he ran off with $16,000. He was not asked about anything related to Tim coming into work late and acting distracted after Maria's body was found. Jeffrey Williams, another manager, testified that Tim had volunteered to deposit the money of cash on October 22nd. Jeffrey thought Tim was doing him a favor. David Scott, a car salesman, testified that Tim called him on the morning of October 22nd, wanting to test drive a vehicle later that afternoon. 15 minutes after Tim left Culver's, he arrived. He told the dealership he was going to drive the Blazer to the bank and then have a mechanic take a look at it. He was supposed to return it by 7 p.m., and when he missed the deadline, the car salesman called him 4 times in an hour. 2 weeks later, after Tim had been caught in Traverse City, the dealership's vehicle was returned. Detective Sergeant Don McGahey testified about Tim being apprehended in Traverse City. Maria Willson's name was not mentioned. Bond was set at $500,000. Tim's attorney argued that it was too high, since Tim never actually left the state of Michigan when he ran off. But the prosecutor said the bond was appropriate, given that Tim was a flight risk. As a matter of fact, the defendant knows that he's being investigated for a very violent crime as well, he said in court. Tim took a plea deal. The larceny charge over the stolen car from the dealership was dismissed. As for the embezzlement charge, at his March 25, 2002 sentencing, he was sentenced to 9 months in jail and given credit for 143 days served. He was also sentenced to 3 years probation in order to pay just over $7,800 in restitution. According to the prosecution, at this time, Tim was a suspect in Maria's murder, but they didn't have enough evidence against him. A sheriff's lieutenant told the Kalamazoo Gazette in November 2002 that they were still waiting on the full autopsy report and more findings from the forensic report before they would forward murder charges on to the prosecutor's office. More time passed. Tim served out his sentence for the embezzlement charge, and within a year, he was free. Maria's mother feared her daughter's murder case had gone cold. She told the Kalamazoo Gazette in 2002, "There were very little clues at the crime scene. It was wet and muddy, very wet and muddy. I don't just feel there's anything to tie Tim to the case. It's something I tuck away in the back of my heart. We just want whoever did it caught so that it doesn't happen again." In next week's episode, I'll tell part 2 of this story.
A lot of things go through your head, and I will tell you, some of the things that went through my head were I was mortified that this was going to be everybody's last memory of me, and that the headline in the newspaper would read, realtor found strangled to death in basement of vacant home.
And that's all for this episode. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Rusin. To join the conversation about these episodes, check us out on Instagram @CourtJunkie. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.